Okay, what we're going to talk about today is the Passover. And we're going to start there, and we're going to begin to work our way all the way through to Jerusalem to the death, burial, and resurrection. Okay? And the reason that I like this here at Tel Dan is we talk about sacrifice when we talk about the Passover. And it's just really cool to have the altar behind us. You can get the visual image of a sacrificial system during the Torah times, or in the Old Testament as we understand it, the Tanakh or the Hebrew Bible. So I want to take you back, and I like a little give and take here. So I'm going to ask questions, and you can shout it out. How many Passovers have there been? Who said one? One. There's been one. Everything else is a memorial to that one Passover. Where? Where did it happen? In Egypt. What was the situation? Here's what we've got. We've got the Egyptians. They've been in captivity. We've got the Israelis. They've been in captivity about 400 years. Moses shows up on the scene. Some really cool things happen with staffs and water turning into blood and the flies and all of the stuff, the plagues of Egypt. Do you know that those plagues, each one of those plagues that Moses and Aaron defeated was a god of the Egyptians? It's kind of cool. It wasn't just happenstance. That was an actual God that they defeated through those miracles that they did, that the Lord did, that allowed Moses and Aaron to do that. So what happens is Moses gets the word from God and says, hey, on the 10th day, now somebody's got to remember 10 because I'm going to have to come back to that. On the 10th day of the 7th month, as the month was called Nishri, and on the 10th of that month, here's what I want you to tell the children of Israel to do. I want you to go get a lamb. And it can't be just any lamb. It has to be a lamb that has no defect. So what would be a defect or without a blemish? You're right. What would be a blemish or a defect that you think you would have to look for? Now you're all children of Israel. You're all in Egypt, and you got to go get a lamb for your house. Okay? What would be a defect that you'd look for? Where's my farmers and my cattle guys? A lame, right? Something with a limp. What else?
A disease.
A disease? How would you tell if it had a disease?
Just foaming at the mouth.
Foaming at the mouth. Runny nose, splotchy hair. Okay? If it's a white lamb, it can't have a spot of black hair. If it's black, it can't have a spot of white hair. That would be considered a blemish. All right? So anything like that, they had to do that. Now, he said on the 10th day, you go get it. All right? Then on the 14th day, I want you to do something else. So that's 5 days later. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, right? So we've got the 10th and the 14th day. He says, I want the entire assembly of your house to kill that animal. And we're going to come back to that. 5 days later, after you pick the lamb, 5 days later, everybody's going to have a hand in taking that animal's life. We'll talk about what would have happened then in the houses that would have been in Egypt. What they had, they would have been very similar to this without the altar and about half this big. There would only been one entrance, and it would have been one floor, maybe two rooms, one to cook in and one to do everything else in. Okay, kind of keep the heat out of the other room. So how would you think, those of you that haven't heard this before, how would you think that they would watch that lamb to make sure that it had no blemish for 5 days?
Very carefully.
They slept with it, they kept it by, or more than likely what they would do is they would put a stake by the door and they would stake that animal to the door, so every time they came in and out of that door, somebody could look at that animal and pay attention to it. Now, most of us have kids, most of us have grandkids, and if you don't, you got cousins, nephews, or sisters, or somebody. What are you going to do with that animal if you've got to go through and go, hey, little lammy, what's up? What's going on? What are you going to do for 5 days? At the end of that 5th day, what's going to happen? You're going to love it. You're going to give it a name. It's going to become a pet, okay? It's going to be part of the clan. It's going to be part of the family. It's part of the tribe, right? That's what happened. The children of Israel were told for 5 days to watch that animal to make sure that that animal developed no blemishes. because on the 5th day, they were going to have to kill it. All right? Now, when you read on down in the passage in Exodus about the Passover, it says the entire house is responsible for killing that animal. Now, what that means is it doesn't mean that everybody has to go by and physically cut it or stick it or something like that, okay? But it means that everybody has the responsibility of it. All right? You all have the responsibility to get on the right bus, right? You all have the responsibility to get home okay. All right? But I'm not going to make sure that you're on your airplane because I'm not flying with you, but I'm still responsible to see that all that happens, right? We understand the concept. So you've got a lamb that has no blemish, that is watched for 5 days, and the entire house has to kill it. Now, after they kill this animal, they have to cook it in a specific way. Does anybody remember what they have to do with it? You have to roast it. Roasting is a form of judgment. If you look at it in the context and you see that word anywhere really in the Old Testament, in the Tanakh, or in the Tanakh or in the Torah, you will see that roasting is judgment. You think Daniel was being judged when he was thrown into the fiery pit? Sure. Didn't work, but the king was judging him. Roasting is judgment. All right? After they cooked that night, when they cooked that thing, they'd go into their house, and what do they do with the blood? They put it on the doorpost of the house. All right? And I think Scripture sometimes says the angel of death. Well, if God is in charge of life and death, I think that was God Himself that kind of, as Cecil B. DeMille did, kind of that green fog going through the Ten Commandments movie. Have you ever seen that? I think it was God Himself. He's the one that gives life. He's the one that takes life. And He came through, and He went to those houses, and He looked up and said, "There's blood on that house. I'm not taking them. They get to live." And He passed over. But what happened to everybody that wasn't protected by the blood? The firstborn was killed. Of the people, the sheep, the goats, the ox, cat, everything. Can you imagine the carnage? Can you imagine how many people that was? Then you add the animals. You know, there's estimates of somewhere of 1.5 million people, and I've heard even as much as 2 million people of the Hebrews and those that believed in the Hebrew God that put the blood over their doorpost. So there was Gentiles believing in a Jewish God back then. Romans 9, 10, and 11. That walked out of bondage, that walked out of death with Israel that day. How many more were left dead? It's unbelievable. Does that sound like a story that you've heard before? Now I'm going to get you to answer a couple of questions, and then we're going to finish this at the Garden of Gethsemane. All right? But I want you to do me a favor. I want everybody to close their eyes. And I'm going to tell you a story. And I want you to play this story out in your mind's eye. There's a young man about 32 or 33 years old that came upon the scene in Capernaum. And he walked along, he left Nazareth, and he passed by the cliff Arbel, and he came through into the Sea of Galilee, and he came into Capernaum. And he looked at a couple of guys and he said, "Hey guys, lay down your stuff, follow me. I'm going to make you fishers of men." And those guys sitting there go, "What?" But there's something very magical about this guy. There's something in this man's spirit that they absolutely dropped everything they had and they went with him. He traveled around the Galilee. He was in Nazareth. He traveled all over the northern part of Israel, over to the Mediterranean, up near the Lebanon-Israeli border, back across near Mount Precipice, and back to the Galilee. And by that time, he had thousands and thousands of throngs of followers. And he added 9 more to his inner circle. One fateful day, he said, guys, who do you say that I am? Who does men say that I am? We'll get the answer to that in a little while. He left the area of Caesarea and he said, guys, we need to ascend to the city of my father, Jerusalem. We need to Aliyah, ascend. And I'm going to teach you some things that I have to be a Passover lamb. The Son of Man will be killed, and he will be in the ground for 3 days. That's the story that he leaves them with at Caesarea Philippi and begins to move towards Jerusalem. He gets to Jerusalem, he goes to a place called Bethpage, overlooking just on the other side of the Mount of Olives. He goes to the Mount of Olives. He visits with them there. He goes to the Garden of Gethsemane. Friday's here, but Sunday's coming.